Hello, everybody. My name is Nikki, also known as Pandatar on the Discord or online. And today I'm going to be showcasing for you guys a video that explains how to mulligan effectively with the Abzan Greasefang deck. One of the biggest problems that I see in gameplay on YouTube or on Twitch or even comments on Reddit and Discord are people don't know how to successfully mulligan with this deck, and that kind of gimps their ability to perform with the deck. Obviously, mulliganing is something that is essential in the game of Magic, being able to determine what hands to keep and what hands to ship back often are very large indicators of how a game is going to play out for you on any deck in any format. But specifically, I find that the Abzan Greasefang list is a little bit harder to mulligan with because it's not necessarily a pure combo deck in that you want to mulligan to a hand that has specific pieces, but rather it's more of a blend of a deck that has very heavy leaning combo aspect, but can also play the mid-range game if it absolutely has to. So what I have here is I'm just showcasing you guys the list that I'll be working with today. I will be showing you guys both some examples of hands through gameplay on Magic Online with this list. I will also be pulling up some YouTube videos of content creators like Andrea Mengucci, Doomwake, and Gabriel Nassif that I believe showcases their lack of understanding of how to mulligan the deck, and that affects their outcome of their match greatly and gives them a skewed perspective on the deck. When I think that maybe they'd have a better perception of the deck if they knew how to correctly mulligan it. So this is what we're going to be rolling with today. This is about as stock as I can get it. Obviously, the Abzan Greasefang lists are rolling through a little bit of some growing pains, I guess, in that right now there are still a lot of people that are unsure whether your 3 copies of Eldritch Evolution or 4 copies or 2 copies are the correct number, as well as whether Eldritch Evolution is even correct to play. Whether it's correct to play Liliana of the Veil instead and cut the Stitcher suppliers for extra copies of Witherbloom Command, Satyr Wayfinder, so on and so forth, as well as there's kind of a little bit of a bounce around with the vehicle package, whether 4 Eska's Chariot is correct, or whether it's the full 4 Chariot and 2 Sky Sovereign, or if it's 4 Chariot, 1 Sky Sovereign, or 4 and 2 sometimes. Personally, I think that Chariot is not in as great of a place right now in the meta, so when I was looking to build this list, I was using the list that was running 2 Eldritch Evolution instead of 3, but I decided that for the sake of trying to get something that was functionally similar, I decided that the 4th Eska's Chariot would become the 3rd Eldritch Evolution. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into some of the ground rules of how you want to mulligan with this deck. So here I have a document that shows basically where you want to be as far as when you look at your first hand, what kind of information you're looking for. So starting with the automatic mulligans, because this is where knowing when to send back a hand is the most important. Obviously, with your knowing what to keep is important too, but the keeps are much more obvious with this deck than the mulligans. So getting through the first ones, very obvious. Any hand with 1 or fewer lands, or 5 or more lands. The deck can't function on 1 land. I don't care what anybody else tells you. You need to have 2 lands to give yourself a good fighting chance to be able to win the game. 5 or more lands gets really sketchy because then you just don't have enough resources, and if you brick into lands, then game's over. Anything with no plays through the first 3 turns, so even if it's like 3 lands, double Chariot, and a Parhelia or a Sky Sovereign, those hands you just can't interact or do anything the first couple turns without being very lucky on your draws, and just slamming a Chariot on 4 is not a good way to start the game. You usually want to be doing something a little bit more proactive, especially making sure that your opponent can't just, slam creatures on curve and kill you. Any hands without green mana. This will come up somewhat often, just because, like I said previously, the mana for Abzan is pretty bad at the moment. But this deck can't function without green mana. I would argue that any hand without white mana is also probably non-functional, but you definitely could get away with it if you had something like Blooming Marsh and a Swamp, or a Blooming Marsh and a Overgrown Tomb or something like that, and a Grizzly Salvage in hand, or a Satyr Wayfinder. That could find you your white mana. Especially with the Eldritch Evolution build, you definitely don't want to keep a hand with no green mana. That's just pretty good decision making there, to make sure you'll be able to cast your cards throughout the game. Now getting into some of the harder automatic mulligans. Any hand with 2 Parhelions that isn't exactly 2 Parhelions, 3 lands, Informant, and Fang. The reason for this being is that Parhelion is your main win condition. By keeping a hand with 2 Parhelions in it, you wildly decrease the odds of you being able to put a Parhelion in the bin without your 1 discard outlet of Rafine's Informant. That puts you in a pretty bad position to start the game out, because now you are looking to actively reanimate either an Esca's Chariot or a Sky Sovereign, both of which may not win you the game. And once you reanimate it, if you don't have another discard outlet, then you just put one of them into play, you do the thing, and then that's it. In this exact scenario with 3 lands, Informant, Fang, 2 Parhelions, obviously you can keep this hand. This is a 7 hand that literally just curves Informant into Greasefang and wins the game on the spot if your opponent does not interact with you. Moving on, we have any hand with only enablers that can't get you a Greasefang. So for example, a hand with like double Stitcher Supplier and Satyr Wayfinder that does not have an Eldritch Evolution in it. If you do not keep a hand with a Grizzly Salvage that can't get you a Greasefang, then if you mill over a Greasefang, your only chances of getting a Greasefang at that point are with a Flashback Can't Stay Away, which is going to require you to be on 5 mana, and your opponent can see it from a mile away and can learn how to, or figure out how to play around it. This is a pretty hard stuck rule. I would say that most of the time I would not keep a hand with just Supplier Wayfinder, even almost regardless of the hand, unless it already has a Greasefang and the lands I need. Just because the likelihood of you putting in a vehicle off of 7 looks is pretty low. You usually want to try and maximize the number of looks you can get, and Supplier almost never gets the back half mill. Almost every single opponent you will ever play will respect the Supplier and know not to remove it or give you the opportunity to just chump block with it. And then the last hand, this one will hardly ever come up, is any hand with no enablers. And I would even stretch this as any hand with no Satyr Wayfinder or Grizzly Salvage. Those hands just aren't going to get anywhere anytime soon unless you like have triple Thoughtseize, but even then, triple Thoughtseize is usually a pretty bad way to play a game of Magic. So I would just generally, any hand without any enablers, just go ahead and send that one back. You could probably do better. Now, onto your automatic keeps. These hands, you're almost keeping 100% of the time unless the mana doesn't work or there's maybe another issue, like you've mulliganed down too far. Any hand that has Parhelion, Rafine's Informant, and Greasefang that has 2 lands probably wins you the game. Unless you just get stuck on the 3rd land for some reason or another. But this is basically the bread and butter combo. This is a way to discard the Parhelion and the Greasefang, and you can curve straight into it. And then the other automatic keep is any hand that has Greasefang in the hand, and then a Wayfinder or a Salvage. Because you're playing in the tune of 9 vehicles, maybe 10, depending on your build, having a Wayfinder or a Salvage plus the Greasefang gives you a very likely chance to hit your vehicle. Absolute worst case scenario, you don't, and then you just don't play the Fang, and you kind of fold into that mid-range strategy, or because this is only 2 cards out of your hand, You probably have other cards that will allow you to prolong the game, such as Thoughtseize, or dig deeper, such as Witherbloom Command, Stitcher Supplier, etc., etc. So, with that getting said, these are the pretty hard stuck rules as far as what I see and the way I would play it. There may be some situations that come up that get you into one of these automatic mulligans, but it's not quite, um, you know. But these are pretty hard stuck. I would be pretty hard pressed to say that any hand in this category that meets any of these categories is going to be something that I want to keep, unless I'm kind of just, you know, feeling really lucky that day. But even then, I usually wouldn't do it. Um, so with that said, let's move on into looking at some of the YouTube gameplay from some of the pro Magic players or people that play the game a lot that could have possibly been changed by some better mulligan decisions. Okay, everybody. So here we have Andrea Mengucci playing the deck for the second time, I believe, and he is playing his first match of his league. And this is a hand that he kept. It is his 7. He believes this is a fantastic hand, and I'm going to explain why it's subpar. So going into it, we look at a hand that basically has no enablers. He has one Stitcher Supplier that he's basically relying very heavily on dying in order to potentially get his combo off. And if I remember correctly, the reasoning why he decides to keep this hand is for the very small 1 in a million chance that he plays a Stitcher Supplier on 1 and can't stay away a Greasefang reanimating a Parhelion on turn 2. That is not an appropriate way to justify keeping a hand. There is a very slim chance that milling 3 cards out of a 53 card library is going to hit you exactly what you need to win on turn 2, and this hand, outside of the Stitcher Supplier and the Thoughtseize, basically does nothing. The Can't Stay Aways are completely dead in your hand, unless you get really lucky off the Stitcher Supply mill, and keeping 2 of them is just generally folly. Alrighty, now in game 2 of this same match, he decides to keep this 7 as well. This again has the same issue. He's keeping a hand that has 1 enabler that doesn't really do anything. Especially a hand with double Blooming Marsh, where he's almost solely relying on this Abrupt Decay to carry him through the game, which is just complete. Given the deck that he's playing against, it throws a lot of creatures into play. This is not a very good decision. The only thing that he's banking for on this opening hand is that maybe he can kind of like go Stitcher Supplier into maybe like Greasefang Parhelion and then hope he draws a white source or Can't Stay Away. But as I said in the last clip, that's not the correct way to play this deck. This hand doesn't do anything. I would 100% ship this hand. It's arguably the exact same thing as his last hand. These are just really bad hands, and he's setting himself up in a terrible position to win this game. Alrighty, then in this clip here we have Andrea Mengucci mulligan his 7 hand. It was 6 lands and an Eskus Chariot, very easy mulligan. He's now on his 6, and the card he put to the bottom was Besage You. So this hand again has 1 enabler. I guess you could technically count Liliana the Veil as a second enabler, but this hand is also not looking to do anything very fast. He is hoping that his Stitcher Supplier is going to do something for him. I'm not entirely sure what. Since he already has the Parhelion in hand, he's not really looking to mill. He's only looking to find a Greasefang. So likely he's going to be curving Stitcher Supplier and the Thoughtseize into Liliana of the Veil. This is again a hand, even though it has the mana, that doesn't have enough enablers, and he's basically hoping and praying that he draws correctly in order to win the game. Alrighty, to give you guys an example, just so we not totally dumpstering on Mengucci, of a hand that is good to keep. This hand is something I would keep. It's probably a little weak on the milling, but I think this is a perfectly fine hand to keep. You have your mana. If you draw another land, you can save this Takenuma to do some milling for you. But you can basically curve Stitcher Supplier into Satyr Wayfinder, and if you find the Parhelion, then you just have Greasefang ready to go, end the game on the spot. perfectly fine hand. He keeps it. I don't remember exactly what it becomes of it, but this is a perfectly fine hand to keep. Alrighty, and the last Andrea Mengucci clip we're going to use for this video is a hand that looks like this. This is a 7 that he kept. This hand, I would argue, is probably not strong enough. The upside to this hand is that if your Witherbloom command and your Rafine's Informant don't get there, then you can Eldritch Evolution the Rafine's Informant into a Satyr Wayfinder to try and get you there. You do have both of your both colors of your mana, so it's something that would be risky keep, but I think I would probably keep as well. Witherbloom is not the best enabler in the deck. However, because this is a post-board game, I would also be more than willing to keep this because Witherbloom command could also deal with your opponent's hate cards, whether it be an Unlicensed Hearse, Rest in Peace, or, something along those lines. Worst case scenario, it could also be a removal spell, or it could just be a drain 2, mill yourself, try and set you up for the combo. Okay, moving on to the Gabriel Nassif video that he posted for Channel Fireball. We have his first hand of the first match of his league, and this is 100% a keep. This hand is absolutely bonkers. I haven't really watched this video, so I don't entirely know if it works out for him, but this hand is just kind of everything you want. It's Grizzly Salvage to enable you, and I know that usually having only one enabler is pretty bad, but Grizzly Salvage is easily your best enabler. It allows you to do so much, whether it's taking a land or another creature like a Satyr Wayfinder to enable you more. It's also got the Rafine's Informant in case he draws a Parhelion in one of his first couple draw steps, and it's got Thoughtseize to disrupt what his opponent's doing, as well as all 3 colors of his mana. So this hand is 100% a keep, and that's just kind of all there is to it. Righty, on to the second game of this first match of his league, and this is a hand that he keeps. This is one of those weird hands, especially because he's not on the exact list that I'm running with the Eldritch Evolutions, but this is a hand that technically has green mana, but not really. Because he has the Grizzly Salvage, I would be incentivized to keep this hand, especially with the Rafine's Informant as backup, the Takenuma with 3 other lands. It's not the greatest hand, but it could certainly get there if you hit lucky off the Grizzly Salvage. Alrighty, in this clip, Mr. Nassif mulligans his 7 because it has no lands, and he decides to keep this 6. The card that he bottomed was a second Stitcher Supplier. This is one of those hands that I put on my automatic mulligans list, as it has Stitcher Supplier and Satyr Wayfinder. Neither of these cards allow you to grab a Greasefang, and so the upside to just milling a bunch of cards for no reason is very slim. And this hand in general probably doesn't get you anywhere. Alrighty, in this last clip from Mr. Nassif, we have his 7 hand that he decides to keep. I believe he's playing up against black-red mid-range, and even given that thought, Eska's Chariot is a very hard card for them to deal with. Even given that thought, I would not have kept this hand. This hand has no enablers outside of Rafine's Informant, but that requires you to draw exactly the Parhelion, which is not something you want to be drawing if you can avoid it. So what this hand is looking to do is basically just control the board and hope that the Eska's Chariot can take over the game and win. But overall, I think this is a pretty weak hand, even for black-red mid-range. Alrighty, so here we have Doomwake's first match of this league, and this is the hand that he chose to keep. It is his 7. It does have all 3 colors of his mana. It is a little bit painful unless he chooses to play 1 tapped on turn 1 and not Thoughtseize, which given his curve of Thoughtseize and a Salvage and a Liliana the Veil, I would imagine that he's probably going to be playing the Concealed Courtyard and then just shocking to play the Grizzly Salvage. This hand is probably a keep. The reason being, I know it looks a little weird, You do have the Liliana, the Veil, and the Parhelion. You are not going to combo them on turn 3 unless you get lucky off of this Grizzly Salvage. However, what you do have in your favor is you have the ability to attack your opponent's hand or clear their board with the Liliana, the Veil. But also, you have a guaranteed Parhelion into the yard. If Grizzly Salvage just finds a Greasefang, you're in a perfect spot, and that is almost distinctly the reason why I would keep this hand. This curve is pretty nuts. You just have to get a little lucky, but otherwise, Liliana the Veil is a perfectly fine mid-range grind plan, as opposed to something like Asuka's Chariot, if this were the case. Okay, here we have the second game of this particular match, and Doomwake has decided to keep this 7 land hand. The 7 card hand. This one falls into 2 categories, somewhat, of my automatic mulligans. It has 2 Satyr Wayfinders, so it has 2 enablers. However, Satyr Wayfinder itself cannot grab you a Greasefang. It can grab you the lands so that you could hit your can't stay away and move on, but it also just doesn't really have any action. If you know, theoretically go Satyr Wayfinder into Satyr Wayfinder into Tasigur, that is a little bit of action, but my personal opinion is Tasigur's kind of a weak card anyway, to be playing in this deck. Alright, so here we have the first game in his second match, and ironically enough, he says that this hand is goated. It could be a little bit better. If you had a white source, I would feel 100% confident about this hand, but the curve is there. You can go Thoughtseize into Salvage into Greasefang, if you get particularly lucky and mill the vehicle with the Greasefang. As is, though, you are 100% reliant on hitting the white mana off of your Grizzly Salvage, or off of your 2 draws. It is likely to happen given the mana-based construction of the deck. However, you shouldn't be surprised if it doesn't happen. That's not enough to put this hand back. This hand is very, very good, but it is not conceivably the best hand that this deck could have. Okay, and for the last clip of Doomwake's video, this is a post-board game where he's keeping 7 against, I believe it's Mono Blue Spirits. He is keeping this basically solely on the back of his removal in hand, Fatal Push and Abrupt Decay being absolutely absurd against Spirits. It just clears everything they could put into play. But the reason why I wouldn't keep this hand is you only have 1 enabler, and that being a Satyr Wayfinder. If this were a Grizzly Salvage, I would be more inclined to keep this hand. But like I said, the big problem with Satyr Wayfinder is that it can't get you back your Greasefang. And so by playing your Satyr Wayfinder on 2, you're just milling 4 cards and hoping that you're able to kind of get there from there. Okay, so here I have now entered into the testing environment, I suppose, on Magic Online, and we're going to play around with some hands. So the first thing that we're seeing is this 7 hand has all of our colors, and it has 3 enablers. So what we're looking for when we're looking at these hands is not only does it have our colors, but how likely are we to hit on curve into our Greasefang, and whether we need some of these enablers as backup things like Witherbloom Command if you were in a post-board game, being able to blow up a hearse. As is, more than likely, I would keep this hand. Okay, back with another sample hand. This one falls into one of our automatic mulligan rules. It only has 1 land, so we're going to be shipping this one back. So now we have our 6th hand. This does have both of our colors of mana. It has 1, 2, 3 enablers as well as an Eldritch Evolution. We do have 2 green sources, so Eldritch Evolution is live with 1 land drawn. So this is 100% going to be a keepable hand. I don't think you should ever put this one back. And because we are redundant on the Stitcher Supplier, that's the one that we would probably put back. You could make an argument for putting back a Rafine's Informant because you have no action, and because you are likely to put a vehicle in the bin with the Grizzly Salvage or the Stitcher Supplier. But if you were to draw the Parhelion on turn 2, then curving Stitcher Supplier into Rafine's, discarding the Parhelion into Eldritch Evolution would win you the game on the spot. Okay, here's another hand. This one is interesting, to say the least. We do have Greasefang, we do have Parhelion already in hand. However, we do have 4 lands, we do have a green source, so we're not really concerned about that so much. But what we are almost completely reliant on is hitting a vehicle off the Stitcher Supplier or drawing into a Grizzly Salvage, Satyr Wayfinder, or Rafine's Informant. Likely, in a real match, I would probably look at this hand and ship it back. I don't think the likelihood of hitting is high enough for us to consider that, and with only one enabler, this does kind of reach my point where I'm not super happy keeping this hand. It could work out. I think that there's a distinct possibility that that happens, but I would be more than willing to mulligan this in a real stakes match. So we mulligan now. We've hit 1 land, so we're going to have to mulligan to 5 for sure. And we've now mulliganed into a 1 land hand again. However, we are now on a mull to 5. So we're now looking at the option of having to keep this hand and hope that we draw a second land. Any land casts a Grizzly Salvage, which allows us to dig ourselves out of this position, or we could cast a Satyr Wayfinder instead, which would allow us to Eldritch Evo if we were to hit the nut draw, effectively. Given that this deck probably cannot mulligan to 4 very effectively, I would say that we have to keep this hand and definitely put the Sky Sovereign and the Parhelion on the bottom, and basically try and just hit the second land for your enablers so that you can try and Eldritch Evolution your Satyr Wayfinder into your Greasefang. Alrighty, here is our 4th test hand. When looking at this hand, we're on our 7. We have only one thing to play in the first couple turns, and that is Rafine's Informant. While this hand could lead to a nut draw, air quotes, if we were to hit exactly Greasefang within the first 2 draws, this hand just doesn't do anything if your opponent were to Thoughtseize the Rafine's Informant, for example, and then you're not casting anything until turn 4. So I'm pretty happy to mulligan this hand. This hand is now kind of similar to the last hand, except we have our colors. We also have now a Thoughtseize to play on turn 1. We have double Rafine's Informant and a Sky Sovereign. Likely, in a real game scenario, I am probably unlikely to keep this hand just because Rafine's Informant is like your second worst enabler. And given that we don't have a Greasefang in hand, we can probably go to 5 and be a little bit more comfortable with that one. So we go to 5, and now we just unfortunately run into a hand that is completely dead. This hand just doesn't do anything. There's no enablers. We have a Parhelion in hand that we can't get rid of, and a Can't Stay Away that doesn't do anything because we don't have any enablers. So we unfortunately have to mull to 4, and this deck doesn't particularly mull to 4 well. However, in this case, we are now kind of priced into keeping this and shipping back the Parhelion, the Sky Sovereign, as well as the second Thoughtseize. And basically what this hand is just completely reliant on is drawing into an enabler. This is not where you want to be at all. It's unfortunate that it happened, but sometimes you just have to roll with the punches. Alright, on to our 5th hand. This is again a 1-land hand, so we're definitely going to mulligan this one. So we're now on to our 6-land hand, and this hand is pretty good. More than likely, what we're going to do, because we have a Satyr Wayfinder, is we're going to ship back one of our lands, probably this Temple. Actually, it's probably the Concealed Courtyard. We want to keep Eldritch Evolution alive just in case. If we don't hit a vehicle off the Satyr Wayfinder, then Eldritch Evolution allows us to put a Greasefang into play, but also get the Stitcher Supplier to show us 3 more cards. That way we can try and hit the vehicle. And to do so, we need to have double green, obviously, and there's no guarantee that if we put the Temple Garden back, we get a green source off the Satyr Wayfinder. It is likely to happen, but we still want to just go ahead and not take any chances on this one. So we're probably just going to put back the Concealed Courtyard here, and then take the turn from there. Alright, and for our last hand that we're going to run through for this video, we are stuck with, again, with a 1-land hand, so this is obviously a ship. On top of that, you also have 2 Can't Stay Aways. This is usually just a dead card in hand, especially with no enablers, so we're definitely going to mulligan this one. This hand has our colors. It also has an enabler. We do have a Can't Stay Away, so while the Satyr Wayfinder can't find us a Greasefang, because we have the Can't Stay Away, if we mill one over, we can reanimate it. It does also just have a good curve going Thoughtseize into Satyr Wayfinder into possibly Can't Stay Away or Eska's Chariot or something that we draw. So I would definitely be more than willing to keep this hand. I think likely because we have the Satyr Wayfinder that's probably going to find us a land, I'm going to ship back the Godless Shrine. That way we can still play our curve without having to shock ourselves. Alrighty everybody, hopefully this video is informational for you, and it helps you understand a little bit better how to mulligan with this deck effectively. This is something that you're not going to be able to just pick up right off the bat. You do kind of need to practice it. You need to get in your reps and understand what the texture of your hand feels like and how you can best play around that. If you have any questions, though, please feel free to join the Greasefang Discord. You can ping me. My name is Pandatar, Pandatar. I can answer any questions as much as humanly possible. If you'd like to watch the gameplay videos from Andrea Mengucci, Gabriel Nassif, or Doomwake, the links will be down in the description. As well, I will be uploading a gameplay where I take this exact list through a league. And you can see how I do kind of talk through my decisions. Maybe you can pick up some tips from a gameplay perspective as to how to play certain scenarios. There are certainly some good games in there. So if you like the video, please leave a like. Consider subscribing. I'm not going to upload very often, but I will do my best. So thank you.